All right, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your patience. Sorry for the late start. I appreciate you all being here. My name is Michael Pirelli. I'm a 2L at UIC Law. I'm also returning to Kleinthorpe and Jenkins this summer as a law clerk. But enough about me. I'm going to introduce our three panelists now. I have to use a cheat sheet because their accomplishments are just so many. Please hold your applause for the end when I introduce them all. So first, on the end, we have Libby Massey, Deputy General Counsel of the Board of Education of the City of Chicago. CPS is the fourth largest school district in the nation. Libby represents CPS in all phases of individual and class labor arbitrations and administrative hearings. She chairs the district's Employee Discipline Committee and independently litigates labor and employee discipline cases. She got her JD from DePaul. She then started as a law clerk for the Board of Education in 2011. She's also worked in labor and employment law for the Department of Homeland Security and for a local law firm. And finally, she is active in community service as a volunteer for Nourishing Hope, formerly Lakeview Pantry. And she is an executive council member for United Way of Metro Chicago Women United. And she is also a Civic Leadership Academy Fellow for the University of Chicago Center for Effective Government. Next, we have Thor Noye, Director of Attorney Recruiting, as well as Professional Development and Diversity for the Office of the Illinois Attorney General. Thor began his professional career as a high school English, algebra, and computer teacher in Olympic Valley, California. He received his JD from the University of Colorado Law School in 2000, and since then, Thor has practiced law in Colorado, Michigan, and Chicago. He started at the Colorado State Public Defender's Office, eventually made his way to the Office of the Michigan Attorney General, and is now currently with ILAG. Thor oversees all stages of the hiring process at ILAG, as well as the law clerk program. He's been with ILAG since 2013, started as Assistant Attorney General in the Civil Rights Division, then moved into Civil Prosecutions and Administrative Review Division as Assistant Unit Supervisor, and he has served as Unit Supervisor in the Prisoner Litigation Division. And last but not least, we have Jennifer Crespo, Chief Compliance and Ethics Officer as General Counsel for the Illinois Torture Inquiry and Relief Commission. After graduating from Northwestern School of Journalism, Jennifer began her professional career as an investigative journalist for Catalyst Chicago, where she reported on the Chicago public school system. Prior to receiving her JD from UIC Law, Jennifer wrote for the Daily Herald, where she covered stories on community colleges and international students. Jennifer has extensive experience in immigration law and discrimination matters. She also worked in felony trial and the murder task force for the Cook County State's Attorney's Office and Public Defender's Office, respectively. She was Assistant Attorney General at ILAG from 2016 to 2022, handling consumer protection, national opioids, and COVID restriction litigation. Jennifer was president of the Latino Law Student Association at UIC Law and is the current president of HLAI, serving the Hispanic Lawyers of Illinois. She mentors in both the Hispanic legal community as well as her Bar Association colleagues. Let's get a round of applause for our panelists, please. And so I didn't catch my breath.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah, they have a lot of accomplishments. We got really great panelists for y'all today. So I think we'll just go down the line, starting with Libby for each question. Just brief overview. What is your entity and what does your entity do?
So my entity is Chicago Public Schools, so maybe more self-explanatory than everyone else's, but fourth largest school district in the nation. So we, all public schools in Chicago. The law department specifically is made up of about, I think it's 50 or 60 attorneys who handle, kind of like an in-house firm for all issues that happen with Chicago Public Schools. So we have many different units. Mine is the Labor and Employee Discipline Unit, like you mentioned. We also have a litigation team that handles traditional state and federal court litigation matters, a transactions team, like a school law team that does special education and other student right issues. We've got a FOIA team, a policy team, an investigations team. So it really runs kind of the full gamut of legal services on behalf of Chicago Public Schools.
So I worked at the Illinois Attorney General's office. We kind of refer to ourselves as the law firm for the state. Pretty much any type of litigation you can imagine, we do, whether it's civil, criminal, appellate work. Most of our attorneys actually do civil litigation, but we do have a relatively robust criminal litigation department as well. We have about 485 attorneys right now. We're looking to expand to close to around 550 as soon as we get to the new building. We're still in the Thompson Center. We are the last remaining holdout. Yeah, and then so we defend the state. We also have affirmative litigation. Jennifer was in the affirmative litigation side of it. We also do criminal appeals, civil appeals, and then we also do some policy work as well.
Well, first and foremost, I got to say that anytime I get to sit on a panel next to Thor, I just feel like a dream has come true because he's such a mentor of mine. The Illinois Torture Inquiry and Relief Commission, that's a mouthful. We lovingly refer to it as TURC. The commission was created by the legislature in 2009, specifically to address the shocking truth that a Chicago police detective, John Burge, tortured people into confessing to murders that they did not commit. In a nutshell, we have commissioners appointed by the governor. We have a small staff that takes in torture claims. They investigate the claims. They look at both sides of what happened. They interview the claimant, who is usually in prison. They interview the former state's attorney, the judge, if they can. We go way back, all the way to as far back as the files and records that are found will let us. Once we present all the information, if there's enough substantive evidence and the commissioners find that there's enough substantive evidence that torture occurred, the claim gets referred to the chief judge and gets assigned out for an evidentiary hearing. And some of the folks who've gone through the process, some have been exonerated, some have their certificates of innocence. And in one case, the commission found the real murderer. But anyway, I can never get enough of talking about it, so I'll stop there.
Thank you. So our next question is, why would you recommend a career in government?
Sure with me.
For sure.
I mean, about a million reasons. I love working for the government. I think it provides a really great opportunity to get to do really substantive legal work for a client that really matters. I think, at the end of the day, it's not about a bottom line. It's not about, billing. It's not about how much money you're making individuals. It's really about doing good for the community and doing good for your clients. So I just feel really lucky to work for a client like Chicago Public Schools and the Board of Education. There's a lot always happening. It's a very, very crazy kind of dramatic place to work. Today was no different. It's kind of spinning, but overall, at the end of the day, I always go home feeling like I got to do such good work on behalf of Chicago, which is just not, it's rare, and the friends who work in the private sector or firms, and, I had a brief stint at a firm as well, so nothing against firms, but, overall, I just think you can really, go to bed at night and it's really good work. Plus public service loan forgiveness, of course. I've got one more month and then my loan will be forgiven. So that is a huge perk, and I'm counting down the days. Good benefits, generally a better work-life balance, not always, of course. So, I think that, overall, there's just really a lot of positives you can do for working for the government.
So I started out as a public defender, but I also spent time in firms. I've spent time working in-house, and really I can't emphasize how much difference there is in terms of the work-life balance. Being able to, like when I had small kids, it was nice to be able to come home and see them grow up, which was very hard to do when I was, working, billing 70, 80 hours a week. It's just really not conducive to that. The other thing is that, when you're not billing hours, it just makes a big difference. I used to work in a firm. There's fine people that work in firms, but you don't get to know them when you're working in a firm because you're always thinking like, who can I bill for this? And so working in government, there's really that mentorship opportunity and really the opportunity for professional growth, which you don't see anywhere else except for government. Just really people kind of, everyone kind of rowing the same direction. And it's really a special place to do that.
I definitely echo what my colleagues have said. While my experience in private practice is not substantial, I did immigration law my first couple of years out of law school for a small firm. And I got to say, the billable hours, the thinking about, okay, this is going to cost my client this much, and my boss is expecting me to bill X, Y, and Z, really takes away from the practice of lawyering, I think, and analyzing, and basically all the reasons that many of us decide to become lawyers and advocates. Yes, there are, a handful of those who do go in it for the money, because there's so much money to be made when you have that skill and that asset of possessing a Juris Doctor. But aside from the lack of having billable hours and the ability to just focus on the issues and the matters that you're handling, what really has stood out to me is the ability to have such a wide ranging effect on so many different aspects. You are not just representing one client, an individual, a family, a business. You are representing constituents, most likely the state or the city, or a board that exists under the office of the governor or the mayor. And it really does jive with this public service, mission oriented attitude that I've always had.
Thank you. Our next question is, have you noticed any recent trends or career opportunities throughout your organization?
You really want to start?
Sure. It's during the pandemic, it really changed the job market. My job isn't hiring, so I see this more so than probably most people do. But, when you had a lot of people retiring out of the practice of law, there aren't as many people going into the practice to fill that gap. And so there's a lot more opportunity than there has ever been. For people who are looking to move, or people who are looking to find a job wherever it is, it's a applicant's market. And it's never been quite like this before. We are hiring people that have like zero experience, whereas before we would, require 3, 5, whatever, 10 years experience. But now we're like, we're looking at like taking a more holistic approach. And does this person have those soft skills that we're looking for, as opposed to, we want X number of years. So.
Well, I'll preface this by saying I joined the Torture Commission as its general counsel about 8 months ago, so I'm relatively new. I left the Attorney General's office kind of coming off the pandemic, not because I was in a rush to leave the office. If any of you are interested in working with the Office of the Illinois Attorney General, I can't recommend it enough. I thought I was going to be a lifer there, as some people call it. But then my dream job came up, and I, was brave enough to apply for it, and here I am. In terms of, what my agency, Turk, has seen, believe it or not, this agency just somewhat recently got significant funding. Its first budget back in 2009 was like $150,000. It couldn't even keep up with all the things that it needed to. With which it needed to comply per the statute. So we've been advocating for more money, and because of that, we've been able to hire additional attorneys so that we can get through these claims quicker, because it's inexcusable that there are these potential torture victims sitting in prison waiting for their claims to be heard. Some of them have died while waiting. But what I've found now in my new role, part of the reason I was late today, we are hiring for an attorney position, and the last interview went a bit long. But The ability now to have a, hybrid schedule where you're not just always in office, but there's some kind of remote aspect has made government work a little bit more competitive, where we can't exactly offer the salaries that might be commensurate with somebody's experience. There is that work-life balance and the ability to say, hey, we have this, as long as the governor keeps letting us, we'll see, the schedule, it helps us actually secure some talent that otherwise might look elsewhere. So in terms of recent trends, that's kind of what I've seen that has become a bargaining chip almost, that the government agencies and entities throughout Illinois seem to be playing with. Whether or not they keep that chip, we'll see. But right now it's helped.
Yeah, and I would agree with everything you both were saying. We're just, hiring like crazy right now. I feel like there's kind of phases, we go in and out of, we have a lot of vacant positions and then we don't every few years, kind of commensurate with the economy. But right now, in the last couple of years, we've just been hiring kind of constantly to keep attorneys, on the scalp. And I think exactly like you said, it used to be we wouldn't take someone right out of law school, after they have a couple of years, we'll take a close look. But now that's not really the case. And if you've got some kind of good experience and some, from law school and some, internships where you've kind of established that you've had some good practical experience while in law school, then you could be a really favorable candidate to us. I also think there's some, parts of like government work that is pretty rare to have, like labor, for instance. It's something that, firms obviously do labor, but it's also very much a public sector type job. And so we just don't see a lot of applicants coming in that have like labor experience. So things like that, if you're really interested in working for, government, just thinking about what types of law, might be really favorable to an employer like, CPS or other, city or state agencies. Someone with some labor experience coming in, or even having taken classes in law school and doing some extracurriculars or serving on boards and things like that, really sticks out.
Thank you. Thor, you mentioned you look for soft skills. I was wondering if you could just elaborate more on like what soft skills you look for, and you two feel free to chime in also.
So in my experience, there, when you see a application or a posting that says we want someone who has, this type of experience, depositions or trials or whatever, they're really not looking for, it's not just, you could do 1,000 depositions and still be really not good at it. So really what they're looking for are these specific skills, like do you have communication skills, do you have attention to detail, organization. There are, in my opinion, there are 6 soft skills that make a good lawyer. The work ethic or drive, which can be kind of mission driven. The organization and time management is number 2. Attention to detail, I mentioned. Good judgment, like solid judgment, be able to look at something and say, okay, well, I need to talk to my supervisor, or hey, I can handle this on my own. I know what to do. Communication, oral and written communication. And then, the ability to work with others, whether it's in a team environment or be a leader or a follower, all of those. Those are the 6 skills. So that's it. So if you can actually, I tell people when they're looking at their resume, when they're looking at their cover letter, identify those 6 skills and make sure that you talk about it in a way that demonstrates that you have those skills. And that's what you need. You don't have to say, I've done X number of depositions or I've done X number of trials. If you have those skills, that's really what we're looking for, because we can teach you the other skills. We can give you the experience, but those soft skills are kind of innate.
Awesome. Our next question, a bit more direct. What cases or projects are you currently working on? Anyone can start.
So I'll kind of piggyback off my last answer. I can't stress enough how much my life has changed in this 1 year. I went from being a quote unquote line attorney and assistant attorney general litigating consumer fraud cases. Anything from pyramid schemes to fake schools. There's so much. I think half of my resume is still all of the Illinois Attorney General experience I had. Now what I do is much more high level. And probably the biggest thing I'm working on now is expanding our agency. Like I said, I'm new to this role. I think it's inexcusable that, we are, still, we have this backlog of cases that we just can't get through because we can't hire enough attorneys. And one of the first things I said when I got into my executive director was I'm going to ask for another $500,000 to hire another team of attorneys and a supervisor. And he said, "You're crazy." And I'm like, "Who do I need to talk to?" And I talked to whoever I needed to talk to. And so far, I testified in front of the House. I testified in front of the Senate. The governor's office is good with my $500,000 request. But that's the main project I'm working on right now, trying to convince, people who are, elected into office, who have the ability to, make or break an agency, to, convince them that, we deserve this money and we deserve to be this big, and you can trust us with this because, of all the systems and everything we have in place. So that's taking up a lot of time right now. But I'll get, I think there's a question later on about what we do on a day-to-day. So I'll get there then. But right now, my big project has been expanding and hiring.
Yeah, we have a lot going on at the moment. As always, a couple of big trials coming up in the spring and summer. Some things that we also have bargaining coming up. Our collective bargaining agreement with the Chicago Teachers Union expires next year. So bargaining will start over the summer and into the beginning of next year, which will be a very large undertaking. We also have personally a bill that the department is trying to pass in this legislative session. That's pretty exciting that I've been working on. Got the opportunity to author the bill and got to testify in front of the Illinois House a couple of weeks ago, and it'll be the Senate next week. And it's about, mandating certain accommodations and protections for students who have to testify in some of our administrative hearings where we're trying to terminate a tenured teacher or contract principal. We need to have, student testimony oftentimes in order to prove some of these cases. Anything kind of corporal punishment, physical abuse, sex harassment, those types of cases will usually have to have victims testify. Most other, agencies or, courts have different protections for students and guardrails and things like that. And that really isn't written into Illinois law, into Illinois school code. So, was able to draft that legislation and hopefully it will pass so far so good. That would just allow certain accommodations like, either testifying in a different room or turning off a screen of someone while students testifying, also to taking out of court statements like already given to different, agencies that are there to actually help students when they give that live, testimony and interviews with those agencies that are there to protect students, being able to use that testimony instead of making them come and testify in front of an arbitrator. So those are some exciting things we have going on.
Then our office, there's always something in the news. Like right now, it's I'm going to butcher the name, mifepristone, the abortion drug. That was, our office has been very involved in that litigation. There's also there's the Juul litigation, the vaping litigation that's been all over the news. Me personally, I've no involvement in those. My involvement in cases has been prisoner litigation. As you mentioned, I've supervised prisoner litigation, and occasionally they'll ask me to pinch hit. It's kind of like the Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave. So I will occasionally be handed files, and it's like, this one's really messed up. Can you handle this? So, that's my experience. And I just closed out my last one, at least right now, just the other day. And that one went on. I think that was a 2010 case. So
I think the three of you might have touched on this. If you don't have much more to add, don't worry about it. But what should law students and young lawyers know about your organization?
Yeah, I would say, a place like CPS Law Department and a lot of other city, state agencies, it's a really great place to work as a young lawyer. I interned at Chicago Public School when I was in law school and then got hired more or less when I had graduated and then, worked there for a chunk of time and then left and then came back. That experience that you get, as a law student and then as a young lawyer, I mean, it's the perfect time in your career to kind of take a job like that right out of law school, because you're going to be handed these really large files and you're going to be able to first chair cases, arbitrations, some trials right away, where you're just not going to get that experience working at a firm, where you're probably going to be doing some document review to get started, maybe not a lot of client contact. We just, the volume is so high that when we have, young attorneys or even law students, we're, kind of giving them big things to work on right away. So you really get some great experience as a new attorney working for a government or city type agency. And then, if your goal isn't to stay with the government forever, it just still getting started in the government makes you so marketable to go to a firm or to go somewhere else, later on, just to kind of add that kind of first year experience at such a young age.
Yeah, to echo that, I'm not necessarily specific to my office, but specific to government, at least, you're getting your own files and you're deciding, okay, what question am I going to ask during this deposition? What am I going to ask in cross-examination? You're making these strategy calls as a government lawyer that, when I was at a firm, even after 10, 15 years, I'm still carrying a briefcase. I'm not actually deciding what questions, I'm not even the one asking the questions a lot of times. And so having that kind of autonomy and having the control to do that, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to be like at trial and be like, oh, I wish I asked that question in the deposition, but you're going to learn way more from that mistake than you will ever learn from your accidental success. So the opportunity to actually make those mistakes and learn from them, it's just unprecedented to have that kind of opportunity to really grow as an attorney.
Absolutely. So I was still a somewhat young lawyer when I launched my career into government service, and now I don't know if I'll ever leave. And it's really truly been great. I think my first day I was just handed a stack of okay, here's 700 consumer complaints on this, scam energy company, figure out, should we file a lawsuit or what? And to be able to just, get that and start to learn how to manage was something that was really unique. In terms of specifically my agency, as I mentioned, I, asked for more money. I'm looking to get bigger. And if, all that goes through, then probably around this summer, fall, go to illinois.gov, look up jobs, look up torture commission. And we definitely do consider candidates right out of law school. In terms of, people who are still in law school and have a couple years to go, we do have interns throughout the year, and our interns, our law school interns, actually will get a torture claim, and you'll figure out what's missing from the file, what records you're going to have to subpoena. You'll help draft a recommendation, and hopefully by the end of the internship, you'll be able to present that in front of the panel of commissioners, and they will ask follow-up questions and then take a vote. So it's pretty hands-on, and that's what you're going to find at pretty much any government agency that you go to, either as an intern, a law clerk, or as a first or second year attorney. It's going to be very hands-on right off the bat.
Awesome. Do you want a water? I can grab you one.
Oh, sure.
I got you.
That would be great.
You got it. Okay. Next question. So I know you touched on this, but what qualities do your best attorneys have?
Aside from those 6 soft skills, I would say that the thing that makes someone a great government lawyer is the passion for the work. And, I'm biased. I love the work that we do in our office, and I love the work that I've done in the office. But, if you have a desire to do the work, everything else falls into place. You're going to want to be a better lawyer. You're going to want to, make sure the job is done right. And that's what makes a good lawyer. You're going to have the attention to detail and all those other things that come with it if you have the passion for the work. When I first started, I started in the civil rights unit, and, I'm just a law geek. I geek out about it because, I get to I'm arguing these cases that, I'm citing to Pennoyer or all these cases that we talked about in law school. I'm like, I thought this was like algebra. I didn't think I'd ever have to use it again, but it's there. And it was so cool to be like kind of on that cutting edge and being able to talk about it and like working on it and just knowing that this might go to SCOTUS. This might, at least have like a huge, broader impact across, the entire country. And that was pretty cool. So.
Qualities that the best attorneys have. Well, as I mentioned, my staff right now is pretty small. We are a staff of 9 with 1 contract employee who is like a former Cook County clerk who just knows everybody, and when files are missing, he knows where to find them. So very small agency, and I got to say the quality that it looks like the executive director hired and all the current attorneys that really shines through and is extremely important in the work that we do with the subject matter of torture allegations is their objectivity. When I switched from journalism to law, it's because I thought I don't want to be objective. I don't want to just report. I want to advocate. I want to, scream and yell about one side and convince everybody that, that side is right. The older I've gotten, the more experience I've gotten, the more I've realized that, those kind of true reporting, objective journalism techniques are really valuable everywhere. And the attorneys that we have right now, they'll get a case and we'll talk it through, and they're reading the actual like descriptions of the torture, and it's like stomach churning, and I can see within them this struggle to try to find ways, how can I help this person who was tortured and get out, but at the same time they quickly remember, I got to look at this other part of the file, and the only way you're going to become an expert on a case or a matter is kind of by taking that step back and diving deep into both sides, both spectrums. As president of my bar association, the quality in the attorneys that I manage and help lead there, what really helps people persevere is their passion, is the fact that they have almost a concrete, tangible reason for why they are doing what they are doing at any given point. So objectivity and passion. It sounds like those two things probably wouldn't go together, but you'll find a way.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, how I would kind of look for that passion in a resume for exciting who to interview. We do really pay a lot of attention to, obviously, where you worked, obviously, prior, but in terms of, is it a government nonprofit type side? Also, different, volunteer work or anything that you've done that kind of shows that commitment to the public sector. Not to say we don't hire people from the private sector or have no public sector experience, but I think people who have a career in government or have worked on that nonprofit side, that kind of shows me right away that this is the kind of work that you want to be doing. And this is maybe the type of work you're interested in. And then that seems to translate, at least in my experience, into people who are really getting passionate about the work and really digging into a case file. I think, it's at the end of the day, you're probably getting paid less at the government, right, versus the private sector. And sometimes you might feel like you're doing more work because it could be a week or two before trial and you're working around the clock, and you might be thinking, this isn't how this is supposed to go. I'm making half as much money as my friend who works at a firm and is also working this much. But, if you care about the work and you care about the cases that you have that you're bringing forth, you're not really thinking that way, or you might be in the back of your mind, but you're thinking about how important this case is and how much it means to people, and that kind of gets you through those tough times when you really are working more than you'd like to be working in the government. So I would say, yeah, that piece, and then I also really think organization for a government attorney is going to be key, because most likely you're going to have a really large docket, and so you really need to have those skills to keep things in line, keep things in order, so you're not missing deadlines and things like that is really important.
Next question is, what is a typical day at your organization like?
Sure. It looks different depending on what role I suppose you would be serving. We have investigative attorneys and supervising attorneys. We have a manager who helps get pro bono counsel because we have a lot of volunteer attorneys who help us with our work. If we had been billed for the work our pro bono attorneys did last year, it would have been more than $5 million, I think. So there's a lot of moving pieces. I think the smaller the agency, the more pieces there seem to be moving because there's just more pieces on any one person's plate. In terms of what I see each day, it could be interviewing candidates depending on what the Sun-Times or Tribune released in the morning. It could be getting on the phone with the governor's office and figuring out, what kind of statement to prepare. It's been quite a ride. I know that the people who aren't in the executive director and general counsel positions, their day-to-day really does look like a lot of investigating. They are pouring through records. I mean, boxes and boxes of these old paper records that, they work with somebody to help scan everything in and they need to see what's missing. And it's really, really fascinating watching them, draft subpoenas to try and track down people who don't want to talk to them is really interesting to see them, how they, meet those obstacles and overcome them. So depending on where you're sitting in the office, it might be a little bit more focused, or it could be the roll of the dice for the day.
Yeah, I would agree. There's definitely no typical day in the Chicago Public Schools Law Department. Could start a lot of responding, kind of like you were saying, what's in the front page of the paper that we have to kind of respond to, look into, give answers to, advising our communications team. It could just really, it varied. You could have a whole day set and then something big is happening and then you throw that all out, and start anew and kind of replan out your day. But, I think, on average, it's going to be just a lot of different things, a very big variety, which I think is also why it's so exciting to work for a place, where it's just kind of high volume, but also just lots of different types of things coming across your desk. So you could be spending a day writing, a post-hearing brief or post-arbitration brief or motion for summary judgment or things like that. You're working on 1 week, but then you're also prepping for depositions and kind of doing lots of different things at once. We have some teams in a law department like mine that are more kind of front client facing. So we're picking up the phone when principals are calling with things going on at their schools on that particular day. Like today, some crazy ones. Or other teams that are more kind of on the other end, more of the actually drafting briefs, working through negotiating contracts, things like that are kind of more behind the scenes. So depending on the type of work that you're interested in, there's just so many different opportunities to kind of be doing that, constant client counseling on the phone, giving advice, like helping, in the moment, which is really exciting. But then also, good attorneys who are more into drafting and more into research and things like that as well. So it really varies.
And the only thing I would add is that for most government jobs that I've had, whether it's public defender's office, Michigan, or here, you're giving your own files. And so everything that goes along with that, whether it's, filing an answer or filing a complaint, investigating, doing depositions, written discovery, trials, motions, all of those things, that's you. That's not like, someone's going to say, hey, write this motion. You're the one deciding whether or not you're going to file or write that motion. And so all of those things, go into it. And what I like about that is just being able to make that call and just being able to say, hey, I want to raise this issue. It might be a loser, but I want to raise it. I want to research this issue. I want to try it, test it out, and see where it goes. So
our next two questions are a bit similar. What was the most rewarding case or matter you worked on and the most challenging case or matter you worked on?
Yeah, so I think something rewarding and challenging that I got the opportunity to work on was when and you who've been around Chicago for a minute might know about the Tribune series called Betrayed, where they outlined and kind of described in detail kind of like sex abuse scandals in Chicago public schools over the prior 10 years. Really, dark time to kind of face all of that and see just how Chicago public schools had not been working to support students. Out of a response to that, though, our CEO took kind of swift action to create a whole new department of Office of Student Protections in Title IX. Stemming from that, was just like pumped funding into it right away, like what is needed here. So, many attorneys in the law department got to assist and advise on what might be a good formation for that, get to do some hiring for really key roles there. And then also the district response to that, legally speaking as well. So setting up our own internal procedures to better address Title IX claims and things like that happen at Chicago Public Schools. And now we're seen as a national model for this, advising other city agencies who have gone through similar types of scandals and issues and cases, in addition to nationwide, school districts across the nation. We really are a leader in the K-12 space on these topics. So, a very dark time at the beginning, but being able to respond appropriately and devote the time and attention that is needed in a situation like that to, build out this big office. So working in-house for Chicago Public Schools, in-house for government agencies, you're not just doing the kind of typical labor or, case legal work that you're doing. You're really able to, advise your client and kind of get your hands dirty in some of this stuff to really, it kind of act as an actual employee of the organization rather than just an attorney. So it's these kind of additional things that you get to do once you're really kind of embedded into the organization, like at a place like CPS, and really get to make an impact that way.
So as I mentioned, I love con law. I'm a law geek, and so I'm trying to do amendment bingo, see if I can litigate every single issue, every single amendment that's in the Constitution. But my favorite case is probably my most challenging, and that was defending affirmative action in Illinois for the road construction. It was the biggest case I'd ever seen. Because Illinois, in order to have we receive federal funding for every dollar spent that Illinois spends on highway construction, they get $1 from the federal government, as long as they meet certain requirements in terms of affirmative action. You have to a certain amount of dollars have to go to a disadvantaged business enterprise. And litigating that, with billions of dollars at stake and, just all of these different parts moving was just very rewarding, and it was very interesting. And even though it got to the point where, I'm bringing boxes of papers home with me and trying to filter through these invoices from I think we figured out that there's just a room filled with boxes of paper that I had to go through. It was crazy, and I never felt I don't want to do that. And having even though it was just this monumental task, being able to wake up in the morning and just excited to jump back into it, that's certainly the most rewarding. But it was the most challenging too, just because of the size of it, the number of attorneys that were on the other side against me. It was, but it was a lot of fun.
So I think if my $500,000 request gets approved, that might be one of the most challenging yet rewarding things that on which I've worked. But when I get asked, anything that kind of relates to this, question in one way or another, I always find myself reflecting on my first experience as a practicing attorney, and that was doing immigration law. I had most of my clients were from Arabic-speaking countries. A lot of them were asylum clients. Just really terrible, heartbreaking stories. From a place that seems a completely different world. Those were challenging. Those were very challenging. And sometimes, it didn't work out. It didn't work out for folks. But I recall this one woman with 2 kids, and she was seeking asylum. Her husband had been captured, and the first time she did an interview, it didn't go well, and she was freaking out, and her kids were scared, and we spent days, weeks, months preparing for her like 3-hour-long asylum interview, and she was granted asylum, and that was I think about it every day still. So very challenging, but rewarding. I think probably at the Attorney General's office, the most rewarding thing was probably also the most challenging in terms of cases I worked on, and that was what you mentioned, actually, the national opioids litigation, finding all these records, contacting coroner's offices to clarify, opioid overdose versus, another cause of death, and working with attorneys general across the nation to craft a consent decree or some kind of settlement that we wanted. I thought, I was like, hell will freeze over before people stop calling on doctors to sell, their narcotics to them. And now people don't call on doctors to promote their opioids anymore. So, has the world completely changed? No, there's still a problem, but did it help chip away? I think so. And it helps change public perception as well. So yeah, I think in each phase of my career, I've found that usually what was most challenging, by the end of it, or however you want to describe when the end was, because it kind of feels like these things always continue. Whatever was the most challenging tends to be what I felt was most rewarding.
All right. So our last question, I got to ask a COVID question, sorry, but what kind of litigation or general work arose throughout your organization due to COVID?
So our office was defending the governor's mandates. There was a lot of different types of scams that went on during COVID. There's when unemployment really kind of took off, when everyone lost their job because of COVID. There's a lot of scams, identity theft involved in that. There's just a lot of different types of litigation where our lawyers are traveling all over the state trying to defend these lawsuits. Some of them very frivolous, but just having to litigate all of that and making sure that the public is protected. That was not only I'm very proud of our office for being at the front of that, but also just knowing that we can make that kind of difference.
Well, right before I left the AG's office, one of the things that I had still been working on, and that I unfortunately had to pass down to others. I probably don't have to tell you, Thor, but that's when I found it difficult. It's like, these are my cases. I've been working on these. Like, I know where I want them to go. But one of the last things to which I'd been assigned were all these scams that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic. I was in consumer fraud, so I was with like a task force almost, and we investigated fake vaccines, and then when all the testing stuff came out, we investigated all these like COVID-19 testing scam sites, and that, talk about feeling like you are building a plane while flying it. Some people are still like, what's COVID? What is PCR? It was just such almost a foreign concept. And now, of course, wherever you go, there's going to be, that will never leave my mind. I am like, it took me forever to stop calling people consumers, first of all. But scammers are everywhere. And when COVID-19 hit, that was no exception. And you found things creeping up in places you would not have even imagined. Yeah, that was the COVID-19 related thing that really stuck out to me because I was on like 7-hour long calls with eyewitnesses who, saw the scams happening and the fake testing happening. And yeah, that was wild. That was wild.
And we had a ton of litigation around, school reopening during COVID, and when is it safe to reopen, and then what are classrooms going to look like when schools are reopening, mask requirements or not, in addition to vaccine mandates, and keeping track of all of that. Well read.
I imagine, yeah. So that was my last question for these three. We have time for questions from them.
Yeah.
Awesome, great. So if any of you have questions, just raise your hand, shout it out.
Can you talk a little bit about how your jobs are affected by changes in administration, if at all?
I mean, yeah. So the thing, you see, what happened was with the state of Illinois agencies, especially boards comprised of commissioners that are all appointed by the governor. Depending on who the administration is, they can give you a bunch of lame ducks. They could not appoint people. I mean, that's just the nature of working, I think, in state of Illinois government, a city government, county government. It's a political animal at the end of the day, as much as, we try to pretend maybe it's not. And you have to be mindful of that. Your job might, very well be, 10 years long, or somebody can come in and decide, nope. So it's something that kind of, always keeps you on your toes. So if you're looking for that kind of excitement in your life.
Yeah, I would say it, greatly impacts the work at Chicago Public Schools, especially now. I think that, with every new mayor, it's, sort of talking about mayoral transitions. I think there's very likely going to be a new board, could be a new CEO. That kind of happens each time a new mayor comes in, at least a board at the current time, just before we move over to elected school boards. But yeah, I think it definitely changes those at the top of the organization. I think in the law department specifically, it could impact those at the very top, but usually, your run-of-the-mill kind of staff attorneys, it wouldn't impact too much other than really who leadership is.
When I was first starting out, I was in Colorado, and the attorney general there switched. And when he switched, he said, every attorney has to hand in their resignation, and I will decide if I'm going to hire you back. Those days are gone, at least, fortunately. But in my experience here, I've been here 10 years, and it's only been Lisa Madigan and then Kwame Raoul. There hasn't been a lot of policy changes. It's not like if someone says, well, I don't want to, protect consumers anymore, they're probably not going to get reelected. So, that part of it doesn't change much. The part that has changed quite a bit is just, some of his priorities he's added priorities, like workplace rights has really expanded. Crime victim services has really expanded. We now are starting a conviction integrity unit. So there's other things added onto it, but I have not seen anything taken away. He's also, not to be obsequious, this attorney general has done a lot for the staff and the attorneys. He's raised salaries. He's made the working environment much better. He's really made a difference. But Lisa Madigan, it wasn't like she was not those things. It's just she didn't have the same access. She didn't have all of those same kind of ideas. So it's just kind of different in that sense. But I've not seen a negative so far.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
First, thank you so much for all of your time this afternoon. My question is two parts. A lot of you talked about opportunities to do really important work early in your careers, and I'm wondering what structures you have in place for mentorship within your organization, and then with that, what are some of the best practices you see amongst people you've mentored to help them grow early on?
I think we could do a lot better at CPS in terms of true mentorship. I've seen it a lot more structured and at firms. I think going into a firm, they often have procedures in place that are really set in stone, right? When you walk in, you'll have a mentor from day one that really work with you and, work towards your success. I don't think, historically, I haven't really seen that much in the government. Other than, just the connections you kind of make on your own. I mean, there's ample opportunity, it's a large department. And so there is, we're constantly working together, working on teams and working with others. So I think that, to the extent you can kind of seek that out, on your own, people that seem to be very willing, myself included, for a lot of the younger staff or newer staff on the team. But there just really isn't, at least what I've seen in the government, kind of structured mentorship type structures in place, and we could definitely do better on that. And your second question was about skills.
What are some of the best practices you've seen amongst young attorneys that have helped them?
Yeah, I think in addition to kind of the traits we were talking about a little bit before, I think, being, faking it till you make it in terms of confidence, especially for a young woman, possibly. I think that, like we've been discussing, on those first days, you're getting handed these files and you're going into court, or you're speaking on behalf of your client, maybe not knowing exactly what you're doing, and just kind of putting yourself out there and, faking that confidence to start if you have to, if you don't have it innately, and just learning from it. The first time you put yourself out there, it gets a little bit easier that second time, and then it's easier that third time. So it's just kind of jumping in and doing it, gaining a little bit of confidence from it, and then just building from there. So I just kind of push people, just go do it. It might be scary at first, but it'll be that much easier the next time. And then, it seems to work, people kind of get that experience and then feel a lot stronger going in the second time. So that's what I would say.
And Jennifer probably has a better sense on that, the affirmative side of my office, but the defense side, we have typically there's a supervisor for every 5 or 6 attorneys. So that would, not only is that your supervisor, but that's kind of your go-to person. If you have questions, that's your mentor. We do have formal mentorship programs. You can get CLE credits by doing mentorships as a lawyer through, the CBA or affinity bar groups, but we also have it in our office. We also have what we call employee resource groups throughout the office, which are not only affinity based, but there's also a professional development group. There's a bunch of other groups, just to kind of network and build community, but also to kind of develop those relationships for people who might have been in the office longer and can point you in the right direction. In terms of skills, I would say that, you're coming out of, if you're looking for jobs right now is the perfect time, because there are so many jobs out there. You can actually, you have your choice. It's your market. So what I tell people is that, your next law job is probably not going to be your last law job. But, when you're applying for jobs, apply for jobs that you're actually interested in, because at some point you're going to be sitting across the table from someone like me, and I'm going to ask you, well, why did you leave that job? Why did you take this job? And you need to have a convincing narrative. But you have that opportunity to actually pick a job that you're interested in, and that's really going to carry you throughout that job. If you're actually, if you're kind of like, oh, I want to learn how to do trials, you might not necessarily be interested in being a public defender, but you're going to get all of this trial work, and you're going to find that, as long as you keep that in mind, I want to do a murder trial, so I'm going to stay here until I get my first murder trial, whatever that may be, whatever it is that's driving you, having that drive will really carry you. So.
As much as I want to believe that mentorship is something that, should easily just, come to everybody, and especially come to nonprofit agencies or government agencies, it's not. It usually takes somebody or a group of people who really believes in the power of mentoring and building those relationships to change other people's frame of mind and get them to prioritize that as well. Thor doesn't give himself enough credit. I already said Thor was a mentor to me. He sought me out. He was one of the first people to believe in me before I even believed in me. And it's tough to, you know, find people who really look for that in others. And what I mean by that is look to elevate others, not for the sake of an office or an agency, but for the sake of the greater good overall and for that person. I care a lot about mentoring. I think my, you know, big recommendation, I'm going to do another bar association pitch. You're all here at the CBA, but, you know, join other bar associations. This is a great time to be part of bar associations. A lot of them collaborate with one another. HLAI has had several events with CBA over the last year. And you're able to find a lot of mentors there. And those relationships kind of can form organically. In terms of skills and things that mentees have done that have really stuck out to me. And at this point, I mean, I think I might have maybe 13 or 15 mentees. It's like getting expensive, you know, take them to coffee and events and yada yada. But what I tell each of them and what I've found that tends to be most helpful, you know, in terms of resonating with me and in my memory and with others is persistence. Show up, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Familiarity breeds trust, and the more people see you and hear you and get a feel for what you're about, the more they might, you know, be willing to stick their necks out for you, and vice versa. So get involved, I think is probably what I encourage others to do and what I tend to notice most.
Thank you. All right, I think that's all the time we have for questions. Just one more time, can you give a round of applause for Jennifer, Floor, and Libby?